People power growth, but recruiting and onboarding are expensive, exhausting, and absolutely overwhelming. I've been there, and it doesn't have to be this way. Welcome to Hire and Empower. I'm your host, Molly McGrath. Join me as we interview leaders who care about their teams and distill powerful lessons from them. This show is sponsored by H&E, helping organizations to find their best hire and empower them for success. Learn more at hiringandempowering.com. All right, guys, listen up here. Today's conversation. Oh my goodness. We are going to be talking about nice girls don't speak up or stand out, how to make your voice heard, your point known, and your presence felt. This is a conversation many of my listeners that have been with me for 26 years that I am so incredibly passionate about. But it's one thing to listen to me ramble on and get on my soapbox about this every single day, especially for you employees that your entrepreneur wants to hear from you. But I'm bringing in a national expert here, and I have Dr. Lois P. Frankel here with us today to speak about her newly released audiobook. In addition to what makes her an expert, we're going to have all the links in the show notes and send you right to her website. You can see many of her nationally renowned books that she has produced out there. Nice Girls Just Don't Get It, Nice Girls Don't Get Rich, and See Jane Lead, 99 Ways for Women to Take Charge at Work. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Doctor, and thank you for being here today as our guest.
Molly, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a delight to be with you.
Yes. One of my power partners had shared with me, Cherie Estridge had shared with me about your book and how she spoke with you. And immediately I went to LinkedIn, I found you, and I'm so excited you agreed to be our guest. I know you're actually internationally sought after as a best-selling author and a keynote speaker. And you just have this unique ability to empower, educate, and entertain audiences of all sizes, ages. Talk to us a little bit about your passion and what brought you to being the thought leader in this area.
Yeah, it was interesting because I worked in human resources at Arco, the oil company. And while I was there, I was working on my PhD at night to get my PhD in counseling psychology, because all I ever wanted was to be a psychologist. So I get it. I quit my job, great job, quit my job, open up a private practice of psychotherapy, and realize this isn't what I want. And I was thinking, wow, Lois, what are you going to do for an encore here? And right around that time, a woman that I worked with at Arco called and said, Lois, would you coach someone? Now, this was almost 40 years ago now.
Oh,
and I had no idea what a coach was. Most people didn't know what
nobody did. No.
Right? But this woman was always on the cutting edge. She just was always on the cutting edge. And she said, when I said, I'd love to coach someone for you, but I don't know what you want. She said, Lois, you've done psychotherapy, you've been a trainer, you've worked in human resources, you put it all together, you have a coach. Now, I still didn't know what she wanted, but I thought this has got to be better than being a therapist. And so she sent me the first client, and it was a woman who the bosses loved, and I'm sure you're familiar with this kind of person, Molly. The bosses loved, but everyone else hated working with her. And when she came in, I kind of was expecting the Wicked Witch of the West, and I got this very lovely woman. Now, remember, there were no coaches 40 years ago. So I just started where I knew how, and I said, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and your upbringing, and just let me get to know you. And she explained that she had come from a family from Germany, and she was taught to work hard, keep your nose clean, don't make any waves, right? Don't waste time. And within the first 15 minutes, it became clear to me why no one wanted to work with her, right? If you're, managing up, but you're not managing laterally and down, you're going to have difficulty with the relationships. And so that became my coaching question for the rest of my career. Tell me a little bit about your upbringing. And usually from that, I can tell you what you need to develop as complementary behaviors. And I was primarily coaching men because I was only working with corporations. So the corporation would refer the client to me. And I was primarily working with men because corporations were paying for men to be coached when it first started. But then I coached a woman who was the vice president of manufacturing at a company in Herndon, Virginia. And she was sent to me for coaching because she was a little bit on the aggressive side of assertive. And I go to the coaching session one day and she said, I just want to tell you before we get started that my company asked me to sit on the executive committee. And I went to give her a high five and congratulate her. And she said, wait, I'm not going to do it. And her name was Sandra. And I said, Sandra, this better be good. She said, I've been to those meetings. They're a waste of time. And what popped out of my mouth was, honey, you better quit being a girl. And it was at that moment, I can define the precise moment when the Nice Girl series of books came to me, because I realized that she was acting like the nice little girl she was thought to be in childhood, similar to my first client, and she also coincidentally was from a German family, just coincidentally, where she learned she was supposed to work hard, keep her nose clean, and just just perform miracles. And so the thought of sitting on a committee where people weren't hyper productive was just counterintuitive to her. And so on the plane back from Herndon, Virginia to Los Angeles, where I live, I outlined all of what became Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
Wow. One plane ride.
One plane ride, because Molly, it was so obvious to me when she said that. I thought, why wasn't this more obvious sooner? That the messages that little girls get when they're growing up, particularly 40 years ago. I mean, remember, I started this 40 years ago.
Yes.
Particularly 40 years ago, we're all around, be nice, don't be too tough, people won't like you. And even today, depending on your culture, part of the country, part of the world, you may still get those messages. And even if you don't get those messages at home, today in 2022, those messages are still out there in the form of movies and books and advertising and television shows. So that's what became Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. Nice Girls Don't Get Rich. Nice Girls Just Don't Get It. And Nice Girls Don't Speak Up and Stand Out. Because a nice girl is one who acts according to how she was taught to behave in childhood. So that's what makes a nice girl. It doesn't mean you can't be nice. Nice is, as you know, nice is necessary for success. It's simply not sufficient.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to dive into this because, you don't even necessarily have to be on the executive level or the C-suite of your career path. I struggle with this every single day, and I'd love for you to just really give us some wisdom here. When you hire even just a receptionist or administrative assistant or what have you, I always say they were taught and trained to keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, do what you're told, and you will be rewarded with a paycheck at the end. But in my experience, a small business owner is who I deal with by and large, or medium-sized company, is they're desperate for their team to speak up. And no matter how much they give them permission to do so, or they give them the authority to do so, it's almost like a trauma response. I cannot get people to say, when they come to one-on-one calls with me, they'll say, well, I'm like, that's brilliant. Did you share that with your attorney? Did you share that with your leaders? Did you share that with your executive team? And they're like, no, because people have a frame of reference of, well, I saw the last guy or gal that did that, and she's no longer here. She's fired, which to your point, you can probably trace all the way back to 5 years old.
Exactly. And one of the reasons why Nice Girls Don't Speak Up or Stand Out is because when I would do keynotes around the other books, people would come up to me, women would come up to me at the end and say, I wish I had you on my shoulder when I had to say this, or when I wanted to ask for this. And I thought, well, you can't have me on your shoulder, but you can have me in your ear if I write this book. And the working title for that book was How to Tell People to Go to Hell So They Look Forward to the Trip. Because,
Oh,
right, because that's really the challenge that women have, isn't it, Molly? It's like there's different rules for how we are supposed to communicate, whether it's in a small business, a consulting firm, a legal firm, it doesn't matter. There are different rules for how we're supposed to communicate. And if we don't know those rules, we often won't speak up. And as you said, it's what keeps women from speaking up. My feeling is if they knew better, they do better. And so what I do in Nice Girls Don't Speak Up and Stand Out, is I provide about 100 simple techniques that you can use to find your voice. And just last week, somebody asked me well, how do I start? If I've been the kind of person who's never spoken up, how do I start? And I said, just start by taking baby steps. One of the techniques, so did I answer your question, by the way, Molly?
you did. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the, techniques that I use is called contrasting. And so for the woman that you just said, she's afraid to speak up because maybe the woman who spoke up 3 months ago is no longer there. It depends on how she spoke up, right? So, but there's a technique, a very simple technique, and it's called contrasting. And it's where you say what you do want and you don't want. So can you imagine if this woman said something like, I don't want you to think that I think I know everything, because I don't. At the same time, I've been in this role now for about 2 years, and there's some things that I've observed that I think if we address would really help us to move our bottom line forward. And I'd like to share those with you. Now, if someone said it exactly like that, unless they have a boss who's a Neanderthal, and in which case, why are you working there anyway? Somebody's going to say, of course, tell me what you think, right? And as you said, nowadays, particularly in entrepreneurial firms, they don't just want you to speak up, they need you to speak up. I can't tell you how many people have been sent to me for coaching because, quote unquote, they don't add value. And that's because they don't speak up. They only do what they're told. And so I often say, if you go to work and you do exactly what you're told to do, and you do it really well, it's just table stakes. You should be able to keep your job, but you're probably not going to get promoted. You're not going to get recognized. You're not going to get rewarded, because those are table stakes.
Wow. And as you were talking, I have so many questions right now, but using that example that you use of that one simple technique, this would, all right, how do I get started? So I love that technique. Here's what I hear from people. I've never really spoke up. I've never, just kind of did what I was told to do. And I'm afraid, because whether they have this past experience or not, when I do speak up, especially for women, and I know you have videos that I've seen on your website around this, I'm afraid I'm going to start crying. I'm afraid all these emotions are going to come through, and then I'm going to look weak. Or I hear from the other side of the table, the business owner, that, people are constantly lining up and coming in my office and they're in a pile of tears. And so they have this pigeonhole of that, they're just quote unquote emotional.
Yeah. It's, as I often say, asking a woman not to be emotional is a little bit like teaching a pig to sing. You're gonna, frustrate the woman, and you're gonna, or frustrate the pig, and you're gonna, annoy the teacher, right? So it's like, I can't tell a woman not to get emotional. She's gonna get emotional, period. And so it's not so bad that you get emotional. It's that you make people uncomfortable with it. And so before you get emotional, before you find yourself in tears and you're going to be giving a message, you have to prepare the message, right? So let's just say you want to talk to the boss about the fact that, oh, I don't know.
You want a raise. You haven't had a raise in a
Okay,
while.
perfect, perfect. You haven't had a raise in a while. Well, if you go in there and you get teary about it, that's usually because you're really pissed off. Women get teary when they're really angry because it has been socially acceptable to be teary, but it's not socially acceptable for women to be angry.
Mm,
So I tell women to get in touch with the anger and put words to it. If you so let's go through this whole scenario because
please.
I'll show you exactly how this would work. I go in and talk to my boss and I start with, I don't want you to think that I'm not grateful for everything you've done for me, because I am. See, I'm using that contrasting. At the same time, I'd like to talk to you about why I believe I've earned a raise. And let's just say at this point, you start getting tearful. Then what you do is three things. First, you excuse yourself and you say, you see, I'm very emotional about this. Would you excuse me while I collect myself, and I'll be right back? Because the most important thing is you not make people uncomfortable. They'll be grateful for you, to you. When you excuse yourself, ask yourself, what am I angry about? Well, I'm angry about the fact that I've asked for this on 3 different occasions and I've never gotten it. Okay, now you have words that you can use. And the third thing to ask yourself is, and who does this person remind me of? Does this person remind me of my father, who was always withholding things from me? Or another boss who was always mean to me? Or just make sure you're talking to the person you're talking to
Mm.
and not someone else in your life. So once you do that and you have your words put together, you could go back and make your case. Now you go back and you start using headlines. Okay. And it sounds like this. You come back and you say, thank you for giving me a moment. I realized that what I was upset about was that we've talked about this on 3 different occasions. And each time I've been promised a raise, but I've never gotten it. Now, there's 3 reasons why I believe now is the time for me to get that raise. First, I haven't gotten a raise in 2 years. So it's time to recognize my performance. Number 2, I have achieved every goal that has been set for me. Not only has I achieved it, I've exceeded it. And you've told me that. So it seems like that's the second reason why now is the time for a raise. And the third reason is because I've done the research and my job is underpaid in comparison to the market by about 15%. So what I'd like now is to talk about how we're going to make this happen. Now, Molly, you could hear I recovered from the emotional. I went in and without being angry, I expressed my anger. I realized I was frustrated. I'm frustrated because we've had this conversation on 3 different occasions. I put words to what was bothering me, but that I didn't stop there. I gave a rationale for why I should get this raise. And then I ended with a call to action. So let's talk about how we're going to make this happen.
Mm. I love the framework, and most people love a structure. They like a framework. They like standards. A few things came to me that I always train and coach my employees to help them with that emotion. Number 1. Number 2, not whoever you're sitting down with, to have that courageous conversation with it. You're not blindsiding them. In my experience, I'll say, okay, great. Put time on the calendar and maybe in there, put notes in what you want to talk about, so they at least can prepare themselves for that. And then also you might have that agenda in there or present an agenda to help keep the emotions out of there for you to anchor to. But I'd love your insight on this one too, because my experience is the emotions come up because you're not used to, sometimes it's the first time you've heard your own voice in this
Mm,
context. And so, practice makes perfect, if you will, or practice makes
mhm.
progress. And just knowing that, because so often people say to me, oh gosh, The last time I tried doing that, I made a blubbering fool out of myself. I was a mess. I was crying. I got off task. So having your framework. But wouldn't you say that if you keep leaning into and using and hearing your own voice, it's like when people step up to the microphone, right? They
Mhm.
freeze because sometimes it's first time they heard their own voice in stereo.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely 100% right that it's about practice. I like how you said it. Practice makes progress, and it's about preparation. That you should never go in and ask for a raise or anything else for that matter without being prepared.
Yeah.
And that because chance favors the prepared mind, right? And
Oh, say that
yeah,
again.
chance favors the prepared mind.
Beautiful.
If you're going to have any luck, it's going to be because you prepared. So you take this model, and again, the model is in the audiobook, but I also have a workbook that goes along with it that, Molly, I will
Oh,
give to any one of your listeners who contacts me through my website. All they have to do is contact me, say, I heard you on Molly's show and you offered a free workbook. Could I please have the workbook? And I will send it to you. There's no strings
oh,
attached.
great.
Yeah, I don't keep a mailing list. I don't market to you. I simply offer it to you because I know it helps you to have these templates for how to communicate. So everything I've talked about so far is in the workbook. So so I think it's important that you do prepare in advance what it is you want to say, because otherwise you are going to stutter and get emotional, and then the more you stutter and you feel like you don't know what you're doing, the more emotional you get, and it's like a vicious cycle. Now, one last thing I would recommend, and I'll never forget, I recommended this to a woman who was in a class of mine probably, oh, it could have been 25 or 30 years ago. And she was the quietest woman in the class. It was a class of both men and women. And I said, you need to join Toastmasters. And she looked at me and I said, to find your voice, one of the fastest, most economical, and effective ways to learn to find your voice is Toastmasters. They're in almost every city. They meet during the lunch hour. I'm sure during COVID, they had virtual
Zoom.
Zoom meetings. Yeah. And what Toastmasters does is it gives people a chance to practice communicating different things. So it may be one week they say, okay, it's going to be your turn next week, and you're going to get up and convince us to buy something from you, right? And so you get up and you have to practice that. Now, the end of this story, though, it doesn't end there. This woman comes up to me about maybe 3 years later, and she goes, just comes right up and she goes, Lois Frankel, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your class about 3 years ago, and you told me to join Toastmasters, and I did, and it made a difference in my life. And I actually became president of Toastmasters. And I thought to myself, I told you to join Toastmasters because I never would have imagined this woman at one point in her life needed Toastmasters. So it can be a real game changer.
Oh, yes. I actually, that's where I started as well. I had a coach tell me back in, I don't know, late 90s to join Toastmasters as well. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. So if I'm a business owner or a leader and I see the title of this book, I hear us on this podcast, and I hear this very jarring, catchy title for your book, and I'm a male, am I going to panic that my employees are going to listen to this audio book and, come marching in my office and I am woman, hear me roar, and all this jazz that comes associated with women finding their voice?
I don't think you should panic about that at all, because what you're going to find is women are going to come in, and as I said earlier, they may tell you to go to hell, but they're going to do it in such a way that you're going to look forward to the trip. You're not even going to know what happened to you, because I'm a big believer in the best communication shows high respect for the person I'm communicating with and high respect for myself. So just as you heard in the example I gave for the raise, look, there was no shame, there was no blame. It's just, hey, this is how I feel about this. And one of the things I tell women in all of my work is you can't control someone else. So a guy doesn't have to worry that he's going to be controlled or domineered, because I don't believe we should be doing that. And I don't believe it's possible. Because what you want to do is you want, and this is the first thing I talk about in the book, the whole first chapter is about relationships and how important building strong relationships is to communication. Because when you think about it, the people you have the best relationships with are the ones you communicate best with. So how can you communicate well with someone you don't have a relationship with? And so I don't think men have to worry. Men should go out and buy the book for the women, because what they'll learn to do is, instead of be passive aggressive, instead of get emotional, instead of blame them, instead of, work to rule, and all these other things, they'll be just direct and straightforward with you in a very professional way. And also, one of the things guys should like is, and I write about this in the book, I'll never forget, I was doing some work over at Nestle. I was doing a leadership training program for the women of Nestle. This was maybe about 10 years ago. And the CEO at the time saw me in the hallway and he said, Lois, I hear you're doing this leadership program for women. The one thing I hope you can do is get them to use fewer words. When I ask how the baby is, I don't want to know about the childbirth. And so one of the things I do in the book is I provide a model for how you can communicate to men so that they'll really hear you and not tune you out. So I think guys should want some of what I talk about in the book, because it'll make their lives easier.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Just even that example alone of using fewer words. I can't tell you how many attorney male led law firms that I manage, and they say, oh my God, I'm like, well, did you sit down and talk to Susie about this? And they say, no, because it's going to be a 4-hour conversation. And to your point, I hear that over and over and over again. And then you get the deer in the headlight look from the business owner. They don't know what your point is. You don't facilitate and lead that conversation, take responsibility for it on your own. And whether you have nerves and emotions and what have you, it's like a runaway train. And then at the end of the day, that your boss or your leader has to run off to their next meeting, because not many people are sitting around with an empty calendar. So you have to facilitate and take ownership of the conversation. So I love that you have this in your book.
Oh yeah. And that, deer in the headlights, that's exactly what I talk about, is that one of the reasons why we use too many words, and I tell guys this too, is because they don't give us nonverbal feedback. And so while we're talking to them, they're just looking at us, right? And they're not giving us any nonverbal feedback. And we do the absolute wrong thing. We keep talking, thinking we're going to get something. And instead, and I hope people can hear in this communication with you, I'm thinking in buckets of 3. Every time you ask me a question, I'm thinking, okay, there's 3 points I want to make sure I make. 3, 3, 3. And then even at one point, I used a tagline with you and I said, did I answer your question? And you said, yes. That's a tagline. And that's my cue to stop talking. So there's all kinds of ways that you can cut down your communication. Thinking in 3 is one of them. And using a tagline and saying, did I answer your question? Or, you haven't given me any feedback. I'm wondering what you think about this. But don't keep talking, because people are going to tune you out. And as you said, nobody wants to have, let alone a 4-hour conversation. Most people don't want to have more than a 30-minute conversation.
Right. Exactly. Oh my God. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, how cool would this be if my boss walked in and gave every female on the team, every person on the team, quite honestly, a copy of your book and talked about, giving it as a gift? Because in my experience, this is what I hear from employees. My business owners and all these masterminds or Toastmasters or whatever, they're on these listservs, they're on social media, these business groups. And what does everybody talk about? The latest, greatest book, traction, good to great, blah, blah, blah. We all know all the books, and the business owner comes back and hands it to the employee, and it lands like, read this because you need to be fixed. And there's no context of it. And the title and even the framework of many of these business books are written in the perspective of, what's in it for me as a business owner, and not a real solid tool like you have created this for, to speak into the listening of the person to make a difference for them. So you're basically handing this book, this audio book, sending them the link, whatever it is, sending them to your website so they could download this free workbook. And they're like, whoa, what? Look at this title. Seriously? Yeah. Because business owners want your opinion. They want your insight. They want your feedback. Even the example that you use, hey, we've had this conversation 3 times and it hasn't gone anywhere for me to have the raise, what have you. If one of my employees came to me, I'd be like, oh, God, I didn't even realize we had 3 conversations. Right. I've had 700 questions or conversations since 7 a.m. this morning. I don't remember that. When you hear that, you're like, wow, I'm very impressed you have the data. And number 2, you're right. And I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. And as I said, or I didn't say, actually, as I didn't say, and if you get pushback, don't take that as no. Take it as, oh, I'm going to get more data here. So if the boss says, well, actually, I don't think you deserve a raise, that's your cue to say, tell me why not and what I can do better so that I can get that raise. That's your cue to get feedback. Never take no as no. Always take no as not yet.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So what would you say in closing? What, if you could, again, speaking into both perspectives, both listening, what would you want to say to the business owner of why they want to get your audiobook? And this is a plug for your audiobook because it's phenomenal. And this is something that business owners are struggling with every single day, how they could present this to their employee to really hone in that they want the communication, they want the collaboration, they want to hear their insight and perspective. And then secondly, in regards to drive-by coaching, you would give to that employee that is shaking in their boots, so to speak, and have a bucket full of evidence of why they shouldn't speak up because they have all this evidence of why it hasn't worked out in the past.
Okay, so let me answer the first part. There's 2 questions there. Let me answer the first one first, and that is for the business owner. And what I would say is, nice guys don't speak up and stand out either. My brother tells me that all the time. He says, Lois, you write all these books for women, but the fact is there's a lot of guys that fall into these categories too. So to the business owner, I would say, if you got links, because what you need to do for an audiobook is you need to get the links and give it to your employees. If you got it and sent it to all your employees with this message, I want to hear more from all of you, not just from the women, but from all of you, because collectively we have a wisdom that is going to make this firm strong. Number 2, I want you to learn how to communicate with our clients or our customers, because they are the lifeline of this business. And if you can do that, that adds to the bottom line. And number 3, I want us all on the same page when it comes to communication. I want us all to know how to communicate effectively, because it's only going to make it more fun to work around here. And so that's why I'm giving you this book. That's what I would say to them. I mean, there's certainly a with them in it for everybody, right? So the what's in it for me, I think there's something in it for everybody. Yeah. So that's what I would say to that part of the question. The second part of the question is for the woman who is a little bit afraid to speak up and stand out. I would say start in places that have the least risk. So for example, you're in a restaurant, you ordered your steak. This happened to me just the other day. I ordered my steak medium rare and it came like bloody rare, right? Just to be able to like call the waiter over and say, excuse me, I know this isn't your fault. And yet I ordered my steak medium rare and this is kind of bloody. So I'd like you to just take it back and bring me one the way I ordered it. And I'd really appreciate it. Just be able to say on a small scale like that, or maybe somebody cuts ahead of you in line at a store and you say, excuse me, you may not have realized that the line actually starts behind me. And so you start in small ways and you work your way up to it. Once you get the book, you take one thing in the book, one tip. Let's just say that tip is going to be contrasting. Okay. Start using contrasting and only contrasting. What you'll find is that when you change one behavior, it almost automatically starts to change 2 or 3 more. I talked to a tennis coach once and I said, how do you get the best out of your players? And she said, by not telling them to do a lot of things differently, by only giving them 1 or 2 things at a time. And then that naturally changes a lot of their other behaviors. And so that's what I would say to a woman.
Well said. Oh my goodness. Sorry. They're going to be transcribing this. And I'd add one little thing to your email that they're going to send for the framework.
Okay.
Again, keeping it off the shelf. Imagine if you put a line, and I'd love for us to discuss this in our weekly team meeting, and let's revisit it and read it chapter by chapter together. And let's treat it like a book club and our takeaway. How great would that be?
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that you said that. You're absolutely right. Treat it like a book club. And by the way, there's plenty of books like that out there that business owners should encourage or should give to their employees and then have it discussed, because what you measure is what you get. That's the other thing. You said something before about, business owners can tell people to speak up, but sometimes you're still afraid to. Well, what you want to remember for business owners, and I'm sure you know this as a business owner, and I certainly knew it, is that what you measure is what you get. And so if you give people positive feedback every time they speak up, they're going to speak up more. If you don't give them any feedback, or you kind of give them a cold shoulder, you've just reinforced that they shouldn't do that. So make sure that you're measuring and rewarding behaviors you want to see.
Oh, that is so great. What you measure
is what you get.
Is what you get. So to put this in just quickly a context, if you're measuring the content or you start defending, well, no, blah, 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 versus rewarding them for, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Thank you for having the courage to point that out. Thank you for, as a leader, as a business owner, because so often our knee-jerk reaction is to focus on the content and not the behavior and the bravery.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And many times, and I know as a business owner myself, people would come to me and I think, I know that's not going to work because I already tried that. But if I say that, I'll never get this person to bring new ideas. And just that ability to say, we tried it in the past, it didn't work, but I'd like you to figure out how to make it work because I think it's a good idea. And if we could make it work, I would be delighted. Something like that. Turn it around and say, maybe I couldn't figure it out and you can. I'd love you to help me figure it out. And so, yeah, we need to be doing that more with employees. And one last thing for your entrepreneurs, always remember the 7-to-1 rule. Something you said made me think of this. Always remember the 7-to-1 rule. For every one piece of critical feedback you're going to give to an employee, you have to have given 7 pieces of positive feedback to balance it out.
Oh, that might be hard wow, that is something that I absolutely love.
And it's true. And it's true. I mean, and many times managers will say to me, well, why am I thanking someone for doing their job? And I said, because you want them to come tomorrow and do it, and you want them to come the day after and do it, right? So you catch people in the act of doing things right, and you reinforce it, and you'll get more of that behavior.
Oh, Oh my goodness, what a phenomenal episode. Thank you for all these extraordinary books that you've written, in particular for this book, Nice Girls Don't Speak Up or Stand Out. And listen, for our men, business owners, and leaders and employees, this book is absolutely for you as well. I love if you can take, oh my goodness, that script and send the email out and mean it and keep it off the shelf and incorporate it into your weekly stakeholders meetings, which many of my clients refer to them as. Tell our listeners how they can stay in touch with you.
Well, yeah, you can get a hold of me on my LinkedIn, Dr. Lois Frankel. And if you send me a message, connect with me and then send me a message and say, I want the workbook, I can send it to you via LinkedIn. Or you can go to my website, which is drloisfrankel.com, and that's DRLOISFRANKEL.com. And there's free career inventories on there you can take. There's links to my books. There's all kinds of things. Or you could send me a message through there and say, I want the workbook.
Great. Oh, Dr. Lois, thank you so much for your wisdom, for being a trailblazer in this very, very necessary space, and for all the work that you're doing, and for being our guest today.
Thank you so much, Molly. Take good care.
Oh, okay. Until next time, that's a wrap. We've reached the end of another impactful conversation on the Hire and Empower podcast. Whether this was your first episode or you're a longtime listener, I know you can tell I have passion for people. Whether you're a business owner, employee, executive, or hiring manager, I understand the situation you're in. Hiring, onboarding, and leadership is expensive, exhausting, overwhelming, and if that's not enough, it's also time-consuming. My friends, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a team at H&E that has your back. For over 25 years, they've transformed over 4,000 law firms into efficient, effective, profitable assets for their business and made it fun to come to work again. Check out our Smart Hire solution, our employee leadership program, and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com.